This is Gemara and Beitzah Daf Yomi Dalit. All the learning for this month, the month of Tishrei, has been generously sponsored as we go towards the end of the month of Tishrei. Hopefully, the learning of the Torah Chabura should be a tremendous chas for Shlema Ben Yuta. You should have a continued recovery and hopefully be able to recover at home, as well as the Shulchan of Yisrael Chaim, the very Shemirim Bas Yisrael Gittel Shandel Esef Shana Makel Yomorchem Ben Davashendel Esther Gittel Bas Adabah Shendel, as well as the chas for Shlema Shmuel Yosef Ben Yefreda Man Vavega Chaim Esar Sham Sim Ren Ezel Ezel Sar Bas Kenendel Ita Bas Chian Bas Chayisa Yisrael Memindel as a parent Shalei Shalom Bas Naomi Bas Shafiq Shirchana Shmuel Ben Tila Dinam Ben Chan Rezel Mechayim Bas Minuli Adin Edel Bas Shindel Shina Mindel Sfim Vegeron Mechlei Sona Sela Huva Rivka Hashem that tells Vimech Lester Besoy Shar Chayli Yisrael. We're opening on the top of Lamadal and Aleph. We're going to try to get these shirim up a bit earlier as we'll be traveling back to Eretz Yisrael in Mir Tashem next week. Says the Gemara Tanan Halsam, just to clarify one dot. We said yesterday putting a fire under a tile. If anyone was wondering why are you putting fire under tiles, the reason is because you can put a piece of meat on top of the tile and cook with the tile. And those are the two opinions why you're not allowed to on Yantif, either because it might break from the extreme heat and therefore it ends up that you're doing something for no purpose, or the second reason that we saw in the Gemara was the chasman, that the first time you heat it up, what does it do? It firms the tile, and therefore that is the reason why it is forbidden. Says the Gemara Tanan Hasam, two lines from the top, Lamedalid Amar Aleph. We learned over there in the Mishnah, Darsa oy shetarfa bekaisel. If we have a bird that someone stepped on, or the bird knocked against the wall, the bird is hanging on for dear life, literally. Oy sheratza behema, or if an animal crushed the bird, umifar cheses, but the bird is still fluttering, you're not sure, is it alive, is it not alive? It's hanging between life and death. So you wait, vishasa, and you wait, me'ez la'ez, 24 hours. And then, vishachta, you shechted after 24 hours, kshira, shows you that the bird was not a treifa. The fact that it lived for 24 hours, it crashed into your wall, you stepped in it, the animal destroyed it, and it looks like it's dying. If after 24 hours it's still alive, that shows you it was not a treifa and you're allowed to eat it. It says the Tanakama, Omer Rav Yana, nothing doing mishum lezman and tingnes. No. Sricha, bedika, you have to check the bird. You got to make sure that it is not a treifa. You have to check the internal organs and make sure that there is no real blemish that the bird was going to die. So the first thing that we have is we have a bird that's hanging between life and death. Is waiting 24 hours enough of a proof that it was a living bird? 6 lines on the top. So this bird that's hanging between life and death, you let us shecht it on Yantif. What's the fundamental shayla? Do we create a reisa? Do we assume that there's a problem and therefore you cannot check this bird? Or no? Amar lei tanina. So we responded, it's a Mishnah, our Mishnah, which of course is why this bird discussion came up over here. What did our Mishnah say? You're not allowed to fire up the tile to roast on that tile. And why are you not allowed to fire up the tile? We pondered. My God, what's the problem? The top lines of Aramid. You have to check the tile. And the tile might not be able to withstand the heat and it might break. And therefore, what's going to happen? It might become that you did something for no purpose. So says the Gemara, our Mishnah proves us that mechazkin reisa. Then in a case that you're not sure, you're not allowed to take the chance. Just like you're not allowed to take the chance with the tile because it might break, you're not allowed to take the chance with this bird because it might not be kosher. Amar lei, he responds, no, raya. We go with the second teretz, that the reason you're not allowed to fire up the tile is because it makes it hard, it makes it a kli, but not necessarily is that a raya to our case about the bird, and the Gemara leaves it as a bayit v'yivshita, a question without a resolution. Says the Gemara, Tanya, we learned in a Beitzah, continuing the theme of these tiles that we're heating up on Yantif. A Mishnah actually that we learned in Gemara and Shabbos. I'll just remind everyone, it's a Tosefta actually, but I think when we learned this Tosefta last time, we mentioned the following case. This is why Rosh Zalman says, a random little bit, but this is why Rosh Zalman says, many people want to know, if they put their food in the dishwasher, set it on a timer, shut the door, and then the timer will make it go on. Says Rosh Zalman, absolutely not. You know why? Because of this Mishnah that we're about to quote, this Taisafta. Because the fact that if you didn't close the door, the timer would never work. So you closing the door is an integral part of the malacha. Now, with that interesting introduction, let's see the Beitzah. Tanya. Echan maybe it's if one person brings a fire. Echan maybe it's eitzim. One person brings what? And one person places a pot on top of this wood in the fire. Maybe it's a one person fills it up with water. Then one person puts spices inside the water. And one person stirs the pot. Kulan chayavim. They're all chayav. Each part of the malacha is integral, is necessary, and therefore each one is a separate Isser Daraisa. And like we point out, this is Shlomo Zalman's right, that any time your action is critical and crucial in the larger picture, that itself takes on the Isser Daraisa as well. But in our case, again, one person brings wood and fire and pot and water and spices and stirs. Each person is a separate Isser Daraisa. Tanya asks the Gemara, a different Brisa says no, that only the last guy is chayav. The kulam beturin, and the rest of the people are pater. Answers the Gemara like kasha DCR meikara DCR lebesayf. It depends when. It depends when did you bring the fire. If you brought the fire in the beginning, then each person is part of the malacha, because then each person is integral, contributing to the malacha. Or in other cases, everyone set it up and the last person puts in the fire, then only he is the one that's going to be the one that is chayif. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Bishlam, I understand, kulukav di maisa. They all did an action. El shayfas is a kedera, my Ovid. The person that took the pot and put the pot there, what did he do? He didn't do anything. Why is he over in Isa? I understand the water and the stirring and the spices and the wood and the fire. But why is the mere placement of a pot? How is that in Isa? Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish. Says Rish Lakish, we're dealing with a new pot. Like we saw that you can't fire up a tile because the tile is going to firm and harden from the first time you put in the fire. So to the pot, the first time you put in a fire, it causes it to get hard, and that is the reason why that person is forbidden. And that is the reason we bring down this Gemara, because it came from our sugya of this tile. Of course, our pots nowadays probably would not be within such a category, as our pots are come fully kiln. They don't need to be fired up the first time. But interesting to point out, this is also a big machlokes about, let's think for now, about creating a blach. If you take a blach and you put on a fire for the first time on Shabbos, the Chazon Ish says the problem because you're making the blach red hot. Similar issue that to create metal to be red hot. Tanu Rabbanan, let's learn the Beitzah. Says the Gemara about 20 lines down the 2 dots. Tanu Raviki Rayim Chadash Merin Kechola Kilmani Talim B'Chatzer. A new oven or a double oven is like a regular utensil. They're allowed to move around in the chatzar. Aval ein sachan and you can't smear oil on it. Vein tashan and you can't use a cloth to rub it off the oven. Vein mafigin and you can rinse it with cold water. Kedei lechasman, because these are all practices that make the oven hard, and that's a tikkun mana, it's fixing the keli, which you're not allowed to do. However, if the reason you're doing these different practices is in order to bake bread in that oven, then it's going to be allowed. Tanu Rabbanan says the Beitzah, Molgin es harosh v'zeraglayim. You let us scald the head, reglayim, the legs of an animal, to get rid of the hair on Yontif, to eat it, and similarly let us singe the hair with fire. Avol, ein toiflin I say b'charsis, you can't use charsis, which is some sort of utensil to, application that removes the hair. V'loi ba'adama, and you can't use earth, plaster, and you can't use a special scissors to pluck off all the feathers. And similarly, you can't trim a vegetable with its special scissors. Be allowed to prepare this kundis and the zachbayis, and you're allowed to cook them and bake them in a large furnace. And you can heat up water and an antiche, but you're not allowed to bake in a large furnace because it might crack. Let's just take one moment. We have the moment. Let's just take one moment over here to look at Rashi, all these different practices. What is the issue over here? So Rashi points out, we'll go Rashi in the 3rd wide line, in Teiflin Aisan, you can't put this shmir, this application to get rid of the hair. Besid, Rashi says, why? Derech Abdanim. Because when you tan and you condition an animal, you use this special plaster, and that's the reason why it's not allowed. Similarly, why not use the special scissors? Because it looks like you're cutting it off and you need the hair, so it would be an issue of geizes. Similarly, why are you not allowed to trim the vegetable? Rashi says, "In it looks like you picked it today." So there's lots of derabbanans. It looks like you need it. It looks like you're doing something today, and that's the reason why it's going to be aser. The next two cases, the kundis and nachbayis, Rashi says it's tayriach, it's excessive work. The last case of shematiftach was caused, like we saw before, it might break, and therefore it's going to come out that you're firing up the oven for no reason. And says the Gemara 6 lines from the bottom, you're not allowed to fan a fire with a bellows and yontif, but you're allowed to fan it with a tube, and the issue being that it looks like an artisan's work, it looks like a maisa uman if you use a special bellows, so you can do it a different way. And similarly, you're not allowed to repair a spit, so you can't sharpen it again, because it looks like you're doing a weekday activity. You're not allowed to crack a reed to roast a salted fish on it. But what are you allowed to do? You're allowed to crack a nut with a cloth, you don't have to worry that the cloth is going to rip. Again, different derabbanans, not so common. Perhaps the bellows, I don't know if someone has a primitive charcoal grill, I don't think they have bellows, maybe they fan it with a plate or something, but again, that would not have to be an issue. Says the Mishnah on the bottom of Lamed Daled Amud Aleph. Says Rav Elazar, we have foods that it's not edible. And the question is, when is it not muksa? When is it allowed to be used on Yontif? So said Rav Elazar, you're allowed to stand next to food that is muksa. Moving over to Lamed Daled Amud Beis, Erev Shabbos b'Shvius. Erev Shabbos of Shemitah, on the Shemitah year. So we're Friday, during the Shemitah year, you're allowed to stand by your produce. And you're going to say, Mikan ani oichel, from here I'm going to eat lamachar. You have to designate the yomer, mikan va'ad kan, from here to here. So let's see a very, very important Rashi. The top Rashi in the Amud. Also very interesting, because we're in Shemitah right now. And these halachas are actually Nageya in Eretz Yisrael. Erev Shabbos v'Shvius, says Rashi, if you mere standing by the produce and saying, I'm going to eat from here tomorrow, that's going to work. Says Rashi, Shein Meiser Noigba, because there's no din Meiser on Pirois Shvi'is, Vein Mechoser El Azmana, and therefore only thing that is lacking is Azmana, is setting it aside and designating it. This is very unique. Perhaps not such a known halacha, is that Shemitah produce does not need to be taken off Trumas and Meisers. This is a different issue, is that you're not allowed to work the field, and you're not allowed to sell it, and therefore you run into other issues. But the Trumas and Meisers are not a problem, because there's no din Truma and Meiser on Peiros Shvi'is. So if someone is standing by his own field, and the produce grew in a permissible fashion, it grew on its own, etc., etc., what is it lacking? It's merely lacking that it's muksa. You don't have to actually take off Trumas and Meisers, etc., because it's mutter without that. So what would you have to do in Erev Shabbos to make this fruit ready for you to be used on Shabbos? All you would have to say is, from here I'm going to eat, says Rav Eliezer. The Chachamim say no. Chachamim says, Ache Yershaim, you have to designate, I'm going to eat specifically from here. Says the Gemara, Tanan Hasam, we learned in a Mishnah, we have a child that hides figs before Shabbos, Me'erev Shabbos, V'shachai, and V'lo Yisho, and he forgot, and he didn't take off Meiser. L'moitzai Shabbos lo yoichlu. After Shabbos, you're not allowed to eat them. Elohim Kain Israel. You're not allowed to eat them unless you take a Meiser. Very simple, because in Meiser was never taken off. The fact that you designated them for Shabbos doesn't help you. So after Shabbos, what do you have to do? Take off Meiser, then you can eat it. Mishnah number 1. Utananami, we learned in Mishnah number 2, which of course is going to be a stira. Hamavir teneinim bechatziroi. If someone spreads figs in the courtyard in order to dry them, likatzoitz, to dry them, banav ubnei beisa eichlin mehem, his children and his family allowed to eat them, arai, temporarily, upturim, and they are pater from meiser. Says the Gemara, a very interesting halacha, which we've seen many times, you're allowed to eat produce in an eifin, in a way of arai, in a temporary fashion. You're allowed to snack on produce in the field without taking off trumas and meisers. So Beitzah number 1 said, if a kid takes a fig and puts it aside for Shabbos, Motzei Shabbos, don't touch it until you take a meiser. Beitzah number 2 said that if the figs are sitting out there to dry, you're allowed to eat them without taking off meiser because you didn't finish the process. 2 different prices. Oh, you mean a Rav Nachman? A Rav asked Rav Nachman, Shabbos ma'u shetikva muksa lameiser. What is the status of Shabbos with regard to being kaiveya for meiser? B'davar sheloi nigmru malachtai, an item which is not completed yet. Meaning, I have something, of course, let's just point out again what we just said. Before an item is complete, I'm allowed to eat it oif and arai. Only after the item is complete, and now it has the chiyuv obligation to take of Trumas HaMaisus. The question is, do we say that the mere fact that you designate something for Shabbos, which of course sounds familiar based on the previous Mishnayos, the mere fact that you designate it from Shabbos makes it kvias, makes it a set type of eating, and therefore even if it's not fully edible, you're going to have to take of Trumas HaMaisus. That is Rav Nachman's fundamental shayla. Mi amina, do we say since the pasuk says the karasel Shabbos oineg? And we call Shabbos an oineg kava. Shabbos itself makes it into a set type of eating, makes an obligation of Trumas HaMaisus. And even an item which is not really complete, I don't know. But meaning, does the karasel Shabbos oineg, does the eating of something on Shabbos itself inherently make a kvias, make it that you have to take off Trumas HaMaisus from that item? Amar Leis, Rav Nachman responded, Shabbos kavas being davar shnei gmar being davar shloi nigmar malachtai. Whether it's completed item or not, Shabbos itself makes a chiyuv meiser. Amar Lei responded Rava, Veima Shabbos to me the chatzar. Why do we say Shabbos is like a courtyard of chatzar? Ma chatzar in a kavas el bedavar shnei gmar malachtai. Just like a courtyard is only when the item is completed do we say have to take of Trumas HaMaisus. Av Shabbos lo take about davar shnei gmar malachtai. The same thing should be Shabbos only if it's complete. How do you know that Shabbos inherently makes something koveya that you have to take off Trumas HaMaisus? Amar Lei, Rav Nachman responds, Limod aruchu. It's a full teaching. Biyadinu in our hands. Shabbos kavas bedavar shnei gmar malachtai, davar shloi nigmar malachtai. Rav Nachman responded, this is how we learned the pasuk. This is the karasel Shabbos oineg. We have a Messiah that this is how you learned it. So don't tell me it's like a chatzar, it's a different entity. Shabbos is something which has a kaviyas automatically, and even an item which is not full and complete, if it's set aside for Shabbos usage, automatically it has a chiyuv of meiser. Amar Mar Zutra, Braid Rav Nachman comes like Mar Zutra, says Rav Nachman, proving Rav Nachman's point. We learned in the Mishnah. And of course, this is why this whole discussion came in, because of our Mishnah said he let us stand next to the produce in Erev Shabbos of Shemitah, and now we elaborate and explain what was going on in our Mishnah. What's the reason why? By the Mishnah, mere standing next to the produce and designating it is enough. It's because it's lav bar yisurihu. Because Shemitah produce, you don't have to take off meiser. But if it's not during Shemitah, it's aser that you have to take off meiser. Why do you have to take off meiser? My taima la mishom the Shabbos kava. Says the Gemara, you know why? Because it's Shabbos. You're standing there Erev Shabbos and you're saying I'm going to eat for these produce. Seemingly, even though it's not a complete entity, why would you have to automatically take off meiser? Because of Shabbos. A raya to Rav Nachman. The karasel Shabbos oineg automatically says Shabbos is kaveya. Says the Gemara, a beautiful raya. Answers the Gemara, Loi. Shani Hasam Kim Damar Mikanani Oichal Malcher. No! Over there you said I'm eating from that food. Kava Allah, you made a kvias. The mere fact that you said I'm going to eat from it, that's the reason you have a chiyuv thing of meiser. He says the Gemara, my area Shabbos available chal nami. So why was the whole case Shabbos? Even during the week, is going to say that it's going to be the same. Din Hakamash Malan. We learned, answers the Gemara, the tevel muchanu etzel Shabbos. You know why it says Shabbos to teach us that tevel is considered prepared for Shabbos use? That what? Shem avar betiknai metukan. That if someone was over an aveira and he was over and he separated meiser metukan, it is considered fixed, and you're going to be allowed to eat it, even though you weren't allowed to take off the meiser. But the fact that you did is going to make you be able to eat this produce, even though you were over an aveira. We're going to stop over here, but let's just take one moment. There's a lengthy Rashi over here. Let's just see the first two lines of the Rashi and we'll call it a day. Rashi, 3 lines into the wide line, says, L'hachi naked kaveh Shabbos, Lashminan. Milsa achriti, teach me a different din agavor. Titztarech la'afluge ba'achana. Tananami ha'behedya. Debeshar shnei shvua einoi aser misheis min ella. Misha meiser belvad. Aval achana isa, shim ba'adam echad ba'avar v'tiknai mitukan. If you went and you did it, it works. Umoter lachav le'amina le'mahani le'azmana. Calls man shal nitkan da muksa machas iser tevelu ve'asachsi daite kamash malon. What's the chiddush? Kivan da'agbasa teruma meiser midaraisa b'Shabbos shari ein zeh muksa machmas iser. So it's teaching us, the Mishnah is teaching us the chiddush with regard to muksa, and it also teaches us the second chiddush. What's the second chiddush that it teaches us? That during a non-shemitah year, you're not allowed to take it, not only because you didn't think of meiser, but also because it's going to be muksa. That's the reason why we said the case of Shabbos. But if someone went and was over the din d'Rabbanan and separated the meiser, it would be allowed to be eaten. I'll pick it up from here, Mirz Hashem, tomorrow.